No one noticed the janitor. That was the strange part. He walked the same halls every morning, passed the same desks, cleaned the same rooms. Yet it was as if he didn't exist. People stepped around him without looking down. They spoke over him. They brushed past him. And he never complained. Every morning before the sun rose, the janitor entered through the service door behind the building. The city was quiet then. No traffic, no voices, no ambition. Just silence. He preferred it that way. He signed his name on the attendance sheet with slow, careful handwriting. Daniel. Then he put on his gloves, adjusted his faded uniform, and began his work. The building he cleaned was not ordinary. It was a glass tower that touched the clouds. Inside it, decisions were made that affected thousands of lives. Stock markets moved. Companies rose and fell. Fortunes were created and destroyed. This was where powerful people worked. And Daniel cleaned their messes. He cleaned coffee stains from million-dollar desks, fingerprints from glass walls that cost more than houses, crumbs from conference tables where billion-dollar deals were discussed. Sometimes he paused, not to rest, but to listen. Daniel listened more than he spoke. He listened to how people talked when they thought no one important was nearby. He listened to laughter that wasn't kind, to jokes that weren't funny, to confidence that came from titles, not character. And every time he learned something. By 8 a.m., the building began to fill. Shoes clicked sharply on marble floors. Perfume and cologne replaced the smell of cleaning solution. Voices grew louder. Daniel became invisible again. "Careful," a woman snapped once, nearly bumping into him. "You almost got me wet." Daniel nodded. "I'm sorry." She didn't respond. Another man stepped over his mop without slowing down. "Watch it," he muttered. "I don't have time for this." Daniel stepped aside. "I understand." That was always his answer. But one man never missed a chance to notice him, not because he cared, but because he enjoyed it. His name was Mark Hensley, head of operations. Mark arrived every morning exactly at 8:30. Not early, not late, right on time, because that was when people were watching. Mark liked being seen. He liked his reflection in the glass walls. Liked the way people straightened when he walked by. Liked the sound of his own voice during meetings. And he especially liked reminding others where they stood. The first time Mark noticed Daniel, it was because Daniel was polishing the elevator buttons. Mark watched him for a moment, then smiled. "You missed one," Mark said loudly. Daniel looked up. "I'll clean it again," he said. Mark leaned closer. "No, I mean you missed your calling." Some people nearby laughed. "You should have been a statue," Mark continued. "At least then you'd be useful without moving." More laughter. Daniel lowered his eyes. "I'll finish here," he said. Mark walked away satisfied. From that day on, it became routine. Mark mocked. Others laughed. Daniel stayed silent. What they didn't know was that Daniel remembered everything. As Daniel worked, his mind often drifted, not to bitterness, but to the past. There was a time when people listened to him, when his words mattered, when rooms fell silent because he had entered. A time when Mark would have stood up out of respect. But that was long ago, and Daniel had chosen this. By late morning, preparations for the big meeting began. Security checked doors. Assistants arranged documents. Caterers delivered expensive refreshments. Everyone was nervous. Today's deal was enormous. Life-changing money. Reputation-defining. Daniel mopped the hallway outside the main conference room. He worked slowly, carefully. He could feel the tension in the air. Inside, Mark was already speaking loudly. "Once this goes through," Mark said, "we're talking record bonuses." Laughter followed. Someone added, "Retirement money." More laughter. Daniel paused for a moment, then continued mopping. As he bent down to clean a small spill near the doorway, his knee protested. Age had a way of reminding you it was there. His grip loosened. The mop slipped. Water splashed lightly across the marble floor. The sound was small, almost nothing, but Mark heard it. "What is that?" The room quieted. Mark stepped out, his face twisted in irritation. He looked down at the water, then at Daniel. "You've got to be kidding me." Daniel straightened. "I'll clean it immediately," he said. Mark folded his arms. "Do you have any idea where you are?" Daniel nodded. "Yes." I don't think you do, Mark snapped. This is where serious people work. A few executives chuckled. Daniel crouched down again. I won't take long, Mark laughed. That's what people like you always say. People like you. Daniel finished cleaning, stood up, and quietly pushed his cart toward the exit. But Mark wasn't done. Hey, he said. Daniel stopped. Mark glanced back into the conference room, then lowered his voice just enough to feel powerful. Don't come back in here today. Daniel looked at him. I was told to finish this floor. Mark smirked. Then finish it somewhere else. Daniel nodded. I'll be gone soon. Mark waved him off. Good. Daniel walked away, slowly, calmly, as if time itself waited for him. What Mark didn't know was that those words were true. Daniel returned to work the next morning as if nothing had happened. Same entrance, same gloves, same quiet steps. But something in the building had shifted, not in Daniel, in the people. Word traveled fast in places like this. Executives whispered, assistants exchanged looks, security guards noticed everything. The janitor had been embarrassed in front of the board. Again. And everyone had seen it. Some avoided him now, not out of kindness, but out of discomfort. Looking at him reminded them of something they didn't want to feel. Guilt. Others treated him the same as always, invisible. Mark, however, seemed energized, as if humiliating Daniel had given him momentum. That morning, Mark passed Daniel near the elevators. He stopped suddenly, turned around and smiled. You're still here, Mark said. Daniel nodded. Yes. Mark leaned closer. I thought yesterday might have been discouraging. Daniel met his eyes. I have work to do. Mark laughed. Of course you do. Later that day, Mark called a short meeting in the open workspace, not because it was necessary, but because people were nearby. We need to talk about professionalism, Mark announced loudly. Several employees looked up from their screens. Daniel was emptying a trash bin a few feet away. When clients visit, Mark continued, they expect a certain image. He glanced at Daniel. A certain standard. People shifted uncomfortably. We can't afford distractions, Mark said, or carelessness. He paused, especially from people who don't understand the stakes. Silence followed. Daniel tied the trash bag, lifted it carefully, and walked away. That afternoon, something small happened, something most people would forget, but Daniel didn't. A young assistant named Lena dropped a stack of papers near the copy room. They scattered across the floor. She knelt quickly, flustered. I'm so sorry, she muttered to no one in particular. Daniel stopped. He bent down slowly and helped gather the papers. Thank you, Lena said quietly. Daniel smiled. You're welcome. Mark walked by at that exact moment. He stopped. Oh, come on, Mark said. Don't touch client documents. Daniel froze. I was helping. Mark shook his head. That's not your job. Lena stood. It's okay, she said. I asked him. Mark turned to her. You're new, right? She nodded. Then let me give you some advice, Mark said. Don't blur lines. Daniel handed her the papers. She hesitated. Thank you, she whispered. Daniel nodded and left. That night, Daniel sat alone in his small apartment. No luxury, no staff, no reminders of who he once was. Just a table, a chair, a window. He made tea, sat quietly, and thought. This was why he had come back. Not for revenge, not for power, but for clarity. The next few weeks followed the same pattern. Mark escalated. Daniel endured. Mark reassigned Daniel to the busiest floors. He complained when the trash wasn't emptied fast enough. He snapped when the floors weren't dry immediately. He mocked Daniel's age, his posture, his silence. Don't hurt yourself, Mark joked once. Workers' comp doesn't cover nostalgia. Laughter followed. Daniel kept working. One afternoon, Mark deliberately spilled coffee near the executive lounge. He watched as the liquid spread across the floor, then looked at Daniel. Well, Mark said. Daniel fetched his mop. As he cleaned, Mark leaned against the wall. You know, Mark said, I worked hard to get here. Daniel nodded. So did I, he said quietly. Mark laughed. Sure you did. What Mark didn't realize was that Daniel was telling the truth. The building noticed. People noticed. They noticed Daniel's calm. They noticed Mark's cruelty. But no one intervened. Because speaking up was risky. Because silence was easier. Except once. Late one evening, Daniel found Mark alone in the hallway. No audience, no laughter, just fluorescent lights and echoes. Mark looked at him. "Why do you let people treat you like this?" Daniel paused. "Because they show me who they are." Mark frowned. "That's stupid." Daniel smiled faintly. "Is it?" Mark scoffed and walked away. The day before the deal, tensions were high. Everyone was on edge. Emails flew. Phones rang. Mistakes were not tolerated. Daniel was cleaning near the conference room again. Mark watched him closely, waiting. Finally, Daniel's cart bumped lightly into a chair. The sound echoed. Mark snapped. "Are you trying to sabotage this?" Daniel stopped. "No." Mark raised his voice. "You've been in the way all week." People turned to watch. "Say something," Mark demanded. Daniel looked around, at the faces watching, at the eyes avoiding his. "I'm sorry," Daniel said. Mark smiled. "That's what I thought." That night, Daniel received a message on his phone. A reminder. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. He read it once, then turned off the phone. The final test was coming. The morning of the deal arrived. The building buzzed with anticipation. Everything was polished. Perfect. Daniel arrived early, earlier than usual. He stood in the hallway outside the conference room, listening, watching. Mark walked by, stopped, looked at him. "Big day," Mark said. Daniel nodded. "Yes." Mark leaned in. "Stay out of sight." Daniel met his eyes calmly. "I won't be here long." Mark laughed. "We'll see." Daniel pushed his cart slowly down the hallway, toward the exit, toward the moment everything would change, because the test was almost complete. Long before Daniel became invisible, he had once been impossible to ignore. But back then, he looked very different. Not older, not weaker, just quieter. Daniel grew up in a small apartment above a repair shop. The walls were thin, the heat barely worked, but the bookshelves were always full. His father believed in two things: hard work and thinking before speaking. "Noise doesn't mean strength," his father used to say. "Clarity does." Daniel learned early to observe. While other children spoke quickly, Daniel listened. While others rushed, he paused. Teachers thought he was slow. Classmates thought he was shy. But Daniel was neither. He simply saw things differently. At university, Daniel studied engineering and finance. Not because he wanted wealth, but because he wanted understanding. He stayed late after lectures, asked questions no one else thought to ask, and slowly, quietly, he built a reputation. After graduation, Daniel joined a small investment firm. Low pay, long hours. His co-workers chased promotions. Daniel chased patterns. One night, long after everyone had left, Daniel discovered a flaw in a trading system, a weakness no one had noticed. He reported it. They ignored him, so he fixed it himself. Within weeks, the firm's profits stabilized. Losses vanished. Executives were impressed. But they didn't thank Daniel. They promoted someone louder. That was when Daniel learned his first lesson. Results matter. Recognition does not always follow. Daniel left. He started his own firm. One desk, one laptop, one phone. Clients were skeptical. "You're too young. You're too quiet. You don't look like success." Daniel didn't argue. He let numbers speak. Slowly, investors came. Then more. Then institutions. Daniel reinvested every profit. He hired carefully, watched closely, trusted slowly. The company grew, steadily, relentlessly. When the financial crisis hit, competitors collapsed. Daniel's firm survived, not by luck, by preparation. By the time Daniel turned 40, the company dominated its sector. New offices, global influence, billions under management. But success changed the environment. Meetings became louder. Egos inflated. People stopped listening. Daniel watched his company become something he barely recognized. He stepped back, handed daily control to executives, kept ownership, stayed silent. Then came the boardroom incident. A junior analyst was publicly humiliated for a minor mistake. Laughter followed, applause even. Daniel watched and said nothing. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep, because silence, he realized, could also be a form of approval. He left the company soon after. Publicly, he retired. Privately, he planned. Years passed. The company grew richer, but colder. Daniel watched from afar, read reports, read complaints, read lawsuits quietly settled. He wanted truth, not numbers. So he returned, not as an owner, but as a janitor. He shaved his beard, bought a uniform, applied under a different name. No one recognized him. No one questioned him. The first week, he learned more than he had in years. How people treated security guards, how assistants were dismissed, how power flowed downward. Daniel cleaned quietly, observed carefully. Some people were kind, rarely, others were cruel, often. Mark stood out immediately, not because he was powerful, but because he was careless with it. Mark reminded Daniel of men he had fired years ago, men who confused authority with superiority, men who needed an audience. Daniel watched. He waited. Every insult, every laugh, every dismissal. Daniel stored it away, not as anger, as data. One night, Daniel returned to the old office, the one he used to work in. It had been converted into a storage room, boxes stacked where dreams once lived. Daniel stood there a long time, then turned off the light. The night before the deal, Daniel barely slept. Not because he was nervous, because he was certain. This was never about punishment. It was about truth, and tomorrow truth would no longer be invisible. The final day began quietly, too quietly. Daniel arrived earlier than usual. The city outside was still dark, the streets empty, the sky heavy with clouds that promised rain. Inside the building, lights glowed softly. The calm before a storm. Daniel signed in, put on his gloves, adjusted his uniform, and stood still for a moment, breathing. This was the day, not the reveal, not yet, the test. As employees began arriving, the atmosphere felt different, sharper, more brittle. Every smile looked forced. Every laugh sounded rehearsed. The deal would be signed at 9. Everyone knew it, and everyone was afraid of making a mistake. Mark arrived early too, earlier than usual. He walked fast, jaw tight, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, everything's ready," Mark said loudly. "No mistakes today." He hung up and scanned the hallway. His eyes landed on Daniel. "Perfect," Mark muttered. "Listen," Mark said, walking toward him. "Today of all days, I need you out of the way." Daniel nodded. "I'll finish quickly." Mark scoffed. "You always say that." Mark looked around, lowered his voice. "You know," he said, "people like you should be grateful just to be here." Daniel met his gaze. "I am." Mark smiled thinly. "Good." Daniel pushed his cart toward the executive lounge. He cleaned carefully, slowly, as if time itself had slowed. Near the lounge, two executives were arguing in hushed tones. "The numbers are risky," one said. "The board won't care," the other replied. "They just want the signature." Daniel listened, said nothing. In the break area, Lena stood by the coffee machine. Her hands shook. Daniel noticed. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She looked up, startled. I think so." "Big day," Daniel said. She nodded. "I don't want to mess it up." Daniel smiled softly. "Do your best." "That's enough," she exhaled. "Thank you." Mark walked in, saw them, and frowned. "What's going on here?" Lena froze. "Nothing," she said quickly. Mark looked at Daniel. "Didn't I tell you to stay out of sight?" Daniel stepped back. "I was just—" Mark cut him off. "Just doing what you're told," he snapped. "Right?" Daniel nodded. Mark turned to Lena. "And you," he said. "Focus." She nodded quickly. Mark walked away. Daniel watched her shoulders slump. Another small test, another result. As the morning progressed, tension increased. Printers jammed. Phones rang nonstop. People snapped at each other. Daniel moved quietly between floors, observing, listening. A security guard dropped his keys. Daniel picked them up, handed them back. "Thanks," the guard said. Mark noticed, rolled his eyes. "Don't distract my staff," Mark said loudly. The guard stiffened. Daniel stepped back. By 8:45, the conference room was nearly full. Lawyers arrived. Assistants set water glasses. Executives took their seats. Daniel cleaned the hallway one last time. Slow strokes, measured movements. Mark watched him like a hawk, waiting. Finally, it happened. Daniel's cart caught slightly on the carpet. The wheel squeaked. Loud, sharp. Mark exploded. "Are you kidding me?" The hallway fell silent. People turned. Doors cracked open. "I told you to stay out of the way," Mark shouted. Daniel stopped. "I'll fix it," he said calmly. Mark stepped closer, voice low, dangerous. "You think this is funny?" "No." "You think this is some kind of game?" "No." Mark leaned in. "Then why do you keep pushing?" Daniel looked at him. "I'm doing my job." Mark laughed bitterly. "Your job?" He raised his voice. "Your job is to be invisible." Silence followed. Daniel stood still. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then quietly, "Everyone deserves respect." Mark's face darkened. "Respect is earned," Mark said, "and you haven't earned anything." People watched. No one spoke. Mark turned to the group. "Am I right?" A pause. One by one, people looked away. Daniel nodded slowly. "I see." Mark smirked. "Good." He waved a hand toward the exit. "Get out of this hallway." Daniel hesitated, just a moment, then turned. As he walked away, something changed. Not in him, in the room. Lena watched him go. Her hands clenched. She took a step forward, stopped. Fear won. Daniel reached the end of the hallway, stopped, looked back. Mark was already laughing with someone. The moment had passed. Daniel pushed his cart toward the service area, set it neatly aside, removed his gloves, folded them. He checked his watch. 8:58. Daniel stood quietly by the wall, waiting. The building held its breath. Then, the elevator dinged. Footsteps echoed, measured, confident. The CEO had arrived. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. No announcement, no fanfare. Just a sound that somehow carried more weight than noise ever could. The CEO stepped out. He was not smiling. His suit was perfectly pressed, but his face looked tired. Not the tiredness of long hours, the tiredness of responsibility. He paused just outside the elevator, looked around, took in the hallway, the people, the tension. Executives straightened instantly. Conversations died mid-sentence. Assistants stood rigid. Mark moved first. "Good morning," Mark said quickly, forcing a smile. "We're all set. Everything's ready." The CEO nodded faintly. His eyes, however, were not on Mark. They were scanning the hallway, slowly, deliberately. Then they stopped. The CEO's gaze locked onto a man standing quietly near the wall, an old janitor. Uniform faded, hands folded calmly in front of him, head slightly bowed. The CEO froze. No one noticed at first. They were too busy watching Mark, waiting for approval, waiting for direction. Then the CEO took a step forward, and another. He walked past Mark without a word, past the executives, past the assistants, straight toward the janitor. Daniel lifted his eyes, just slightly. The CEO stopped in front of him. The hallway was silent, so silent it felt unreal. "Sir," the CEO said quietly. His voice trembled. "We're ready." Time stopped. Mark laughed nervously. "What's going on?" he asked. This is the janitor." The CEO didn't look at him, didn't respond. "Would you like to sit?" The CEO asked Daniel respectfully. A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. Someone dropped a pen. Another person gasped. Mark stepped forward. "Sir, there's been a misunderstanding." The CEO finally turned, and in that moment, Mark knew. Something was wrong. "This man," the CEO said slowly, "is Daniel Hart." Silence. "He is the founder of this company." Silence. "He is the majority shareholder." Silence. "And he is the reason any of you are here." The world tilted. Mark's mouth opened. Nothing came out. His face drained of color. Daniel removed his cap, held it gently in his hands. "I never wanted recognition," Daniel said calmly. "I wanted understanding." No one spoke. "I wanted to see," Daniel continued, what this company had become. His eyes moved across the room, slowly, deliberately. I wanted to see how people treat others, he said, when they believe no one important is watching. Daniel turned to Mark. Mark's legs shook. You, Daniel said, not raising his voice, were very helpful. Mark swallowed. I, I didn't know, he stammered. Daniel nodded. That's exactly the point. Mark tried to speak again, but no words came. Daniel looked at the executives. Some of you laughed, he said. Some of you stayed silent. He paused. Silence is not neutrality. Lena stood frozen near the back of the hallway. Tears filled her eyes. Daniel turned toward the conference room. The deal, he said, will not be signed today. Gasps echoed. You're canceling it? Someone whispered. Daniel nodded. Yes. He looked back at Mark. And Mark, he added calmly, you're done here. Mark collapsed into a chair. His career ended not with shouting, but with truth. Security stepped forward, not aggressively, not urgently, just enough. Daniel turned back to the room. I didn't come to punish, he said. I came to learn. He gestured around him. And I learned more than I hoped. He walked toward the conference room doors, stopped, turned one last time. This company will change, Daniel said, or it will not exist in its current form. He paused. Power doesn't reveal character. A breath. It exposes it. Daniel left the hallway. No one followed. No one spoke. The conference room emptied slowly. People avoided eye contact. Whispers followed. Regret settled. Later that day, an internal memo was sent. Policies were revised. Leadership restructured. Mark's name was removed from the directory. Weeks passed. The building changed. Not overnight, but steadily. Executives spoke more carefully. Assistants were treated with respect. Silence no longer meant safety. Lena was promoted, not because Daniel noticed her, but because she spoke up. Daniel never returned as a janitor, but his presence remained, in decisions, in conversations, in pauses before cruelty. Months later, Daniel stood in the same hallway, this time in a simple suit, no attention drawn, no ceremony. He watched employees pass. Some nodded, some smiled, some simply worked. He turned and walked away, satisfied, because the greatest test of power is not how it is used, but how it is restrained.